Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Serino. Alongside me, co-host Dan Kiley. We're here today. It's Tuesday. College football playoff rankings debut. Georgia beat the crap out of Florida. And hey, real quick, for the people who predicted Florida to upset Georgia and are going to predict upsets the next 3 weeks in a row, that's what we're going to be doing every single Tuesday, Dan, for the next 3 weeks in a row. I bet you Glory Georgia Bulldog is going to be playing on this show. Because I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to say it right now, Dan. Whoever said on the ESPN broadcast that Kirby Smart was doing backflips when he got ranked below 1, chef's kiss. He's dang right. Although I don't think Kirby's watching. I'm assuming whoever texted him about Dan's bowling prediction of Florida beating Georgia was probably the same guy that's alerted Kirby, hey, you're the number 2 team in the country. Dan, how are you doing this Tuesday?
Well, listen, this is Tuesday. The first rankings came out. Georgia is not number 1. They're number 2. We're going to get to that in just 1 second. So I decided to come to the show in my sideline gear with my Kirby visor on because it's time to get serious. And, you know, to the people saying in the comments, where are you going to be at when Florida beats Georgia? We're going to be here. You know what? In every game that Georgia plays, we're going to be here every Tuesday, 7:30, win, lose, sun or shine, sunshine or rain, whatever. We're going to be here every Tuesday, 7:30. So if you're coming here to gloat about your Florida win, I guess you didn't come today, did you?
I don't think they're going to show up yet. We had somebody reply in our comments asking Dan where is he going to be if Florida beats Georgia. But hey, we ain't got to worry about that. Dan Kiley actually texted me Saturday and says if Georgia loses, we're doing a Saturday postgame show. That's how far he was going to go. Was we were having a Saturday postgame show. Georgia shouldn't even be ranked top 25.
7-5.
Propaganda's fixing to be big. Hey, you're damn right it is. Dan, let's get into it. If you've been living under a rock and haven't checked your phone lately, or even Twitter at this point, college football rankings are out today. Starting from, let's go number 1 down, Dan. Ohio State number 1, Georgia number 2, Michigan number 3, and Florida State 4. Dan, before we get into 5 through 10, let's just get your reactions 1 through 4. Give me everything you got.
So here's my thing is like this early in the playoffs positioning and all that stuff. I don't really care about the order so much. I mean, obviously the order does matter in the last one, but not in the first one. But I think for the most part, they got the top 4 teams right. And I think that's all anybody should be worried about because in the end, you're going to have to beat everybody anyway, right? So just make sure that the right 4 are in. And for me right now, based on the evidence that we have as of today, all the data points we have as of today, I think the top 4 is right. I mean, can you make an argument that Ohio State is number 1 over Georgia? Absolutely, you can make that case. I mean, it's hard for me to say that Georgia's not the best team in the country, but Georgia hasn't played like the best team in the country all season long. And, Ohio State hasn't necessarily either, but they do have a better resume to this point. Now, all that goes away because Georgia's schedule is fixing to get real good, real quick, real fast in a hurry. I don't even know how that saying goes, but you know what I mean. It's about to get real good. And, it's all going to balance out. At the end of the day, do they have the right 4 teams in the playoff? I think they do. I mean, like Washington to me is just that's Pac-10 glory land bullshit. They don't play anybody. And like when they do have to play somebody, they're going to get their teeth kicked in. And Oregon, I think Oregon at 6 is a good team. Kirk Herbstreit said on the show that's the one team that he wouldn't want to play right now. Harrison, I think you feel that way too. And then, you got some other teams, but they all have 1 loss. They're going to have to wait for things to happen. But, the good thing for everybody else in the country is that 2 of these teams are going to play each other, right? Ohio State and Michigan are going to play each other. So, that leaves Georgia and Florida State kind of sitting there waiting to find out who the other team is. Now, could 2 Big Ten teams get in? Sure, I guess they could. But I'm telling you that if Oregon runs the table, they have a great chance to get in. And I think Oregon has a great chance to run the table. That's my reaction to the top 4. I know you said don't go outside the top 4, but I'm not a rule follower. I'm a rule breaker.
He's a rebel.
I got my Kirby on. I don't listen to anybody.
Dan, I'm kind of with you on this. I think they got the top 4 right. I think maybe not in the order that I would say. You made a great point that Ohio State's resume is one of, if not the best in college football this year. But like you said, they may not have played like the number one team in each week this year. And I can attest to that. And Georgia hasn't either at this point. I think the only team that has played to the standard of being the number one team, and I know this whole conversation could go out the window when we talk about the schedule, is Michigan. Michigan's blown out every single opponent they played. Granted, as my friend Dan Kiley says, they played Northeast, West. You know, I don't know how Dan says it. Dan, give me the school Northeast, Southwest.
Yeah, we played. That's it. We played Northeast Southwest University.
Yeah. So granted, they've played Northeast Southwest University, but they've blown them out. They may or may not have cheated during that. They may or may not have illegally stole signs. They may or may not have had sent a coach to go scout in person illegally. May not have done that, but hey, they blew out everyone they played. Florida State, I think, is interesting, Dan, at 4, because I thought between them and Washington at that point for that number 4 spot, both undefeated, both have good wins. I think Washington's win over Oregon is one of the best wins in the country at the moment, considering the way Oregon has played. Florida State's over LSU, that's a good win. Anytime you can beat one of the top teams in the SEC when you're not in the SEC, that's a good win for you right there. But they're true the same for me, Dan. I could go either way with those two. I think Washington's struggles recently is the reason they're at 5. When you look at Florida State, they just blew out Wake Forest, who not a bad football team, but not a good football team by any means. But Washington struggled, I think, the last 2 weeks, Dan. You were in the chat Saturday saying, hey, are y'all watching this game? Granted, I was not. I was watching the Ohio State game against Wisconsin. Really good defensive football going on over there in the Big Ten. I know they like to say their offenses is great. Or if you're on the flip side of it, like my friend Jay Will, and I don't want to take him out of context here. My friend, our boy Jay Will said, those are just some really good or just some really bad offenses. And hey, his decisions kind of backed it up. They didn't have, many high scoring offenses over there in the Big Ten. But I'm with you, Dan. Top 4, maybe not in order for me. Maybe I'd probably switch Michigan to number 1 just because they've dominated everybody they've played. But hey, I can get along with it at this point. I'm a little surprised that Michigan's not number 1 or 2 to me, but maybe it's just with the cheating scandal that has affected them. Dan, that's my question for you. Has this recent stuff coming out about Michigan, in your opinion, affected the committee's view on them?
I don't think so at all. I think it's just that they haven't played anybody, and I think the committee has a hard time putting Michigan over Ohio State or Georgia based on talent for one, but then also who they played. Now, listen, Georgia hasn't played a great schedule up to this point. It's getting tougher, and we're about to see it get real tough. But they've played at least somebody. The Florida's at least somebody, right? Listen, we beat Auburn pretty convincingly, but Auburn's not. I mean, they're not nobody. And I'm missing somebody that we played that was pretty decent. Kentucky. When Kentucky came in, they were ranked, and we don't get credit for a ranked win because they're not ranked now. But Kentucky was pretty hot when we played them. So like the one thing to me is I feel like it was vindicated on the show because everybody had a different number 1. Like they were going across the panel asking who the best team was, and everybody thought it was somebody else. So to me, that means there's not really a wrong answer because every single person on the panel had a different reason for a different person. Like you could make Florida State right now number 1. And I don't think that I would be upset with that. I think you can make that argument that they are. Have they played incredible every single week? No, they have not played incredible every single week, but they've beaten some really good football teams. They've played some really good football. So you could say Florida State's number 1. Should Michigan be number 1? Granted, they haven't played anybody, but that's not necessarily the kids on the team's fault, right? That's the schedule maker's fault. And every single person that they've put in their face, they've beaten the hell out of. So you got to give Michigan credit for that. Georgia, like I've been saying it all year long, and I'm on record. You can go back to any one of our shows. I said when Georgia feels that the opponent is worthy, they show up and then they beat the hell out of them too, right? So Georgia, I feel like is the best team in the country, but they haven't played like it week in and week out, but they do play like it when they're interested. And then Ohio State plays some really, really quality teams. Now, granted, they beat Notre Dame with 10 guys. But outside of that, Ohio State's played some really good football. They've won the games that they had to win. I really don't feel like with the top 4, like I said, I think all of the right 4 are in it. You can make an argument for any one of them. I think if anybody is outraged at with the order of the top 4, I'd say, go get some ice cream and just just play soft music in the background and eat your ice cream because there's no reason to be outraged. Just the first week, I think the right four teams are in it. And I think at this point, with the data points that we have, I think it would be hard to argue that they're not in the right order. I mean, like I said, maybe you put Florida State ahead of Michigan. I don't know. But how do you penalize Michigan for beating the hell out of everybody they played? So I think it's fine. I do at Harrison. I think it's fine. And I know that's probably not what everybody wants to hear, but I think it's fine.
Hey, I'm with you. Dan, next question. Let's talk 6 or 5 through 10. And actually, first, before we do that, I got 2 questions. Of the 4 teams, just in the top 4, of the 3 other teams in the top 4, give me the matchup you want for Georgia in January and the matchup you don't want. Talking about first round.
In the first round, the matchup I do not want in the first round is Ohio State. And the matchup I do want in the first round is Michigan.
Any explanation? What's the difference for you? Like, what makes the matchup you don't like about Ohio State, and what do you like about Michigan?
What I don't like about Ohio State is they are a legit team that has legit weapons that can play, and they are battle tested. They are a blue blood program, and they're just great. Ohio State's always great, and granted they have a young quarterback, but by the end of the season he won't be young. And then the reason I want Michigan is because what do they do well? They run the ball really, really well. What does Georgia always do? Stop the run. So, I hear you. You want FSU. They're a fraud. I think an easier matchup for Georgia would be Michigan, but you're right. I'm not scared of FSU. Though, out of the top 4 teams, actually, out of every team in the top 10, the only team that literally scares me, or scared is not the right word, but the one team that I think Georgia would have – they would have their work cut out for them would be Ohio State. The rest of them, I think, if motivated Georgia showing up, I think they could beat all of them pretty handily. Maybe Alabama, just because it's Alabama. And even though, yes, we beat them the last time we played them, still the ghost of Alabama are real.
I'm with you. I think Michigan is the matchup I want a lot if I'm Georgia because, like you said, they do something that Georgia's really good at stopping. Like, they're trying to beat Georgia, playing Georgia football almost. Trying to play bully ball. And Kirby Smart said in his press conference, and Brooks Austin said it over and over and over again on his film study, there's one thing you don't do, and you don't run north and south in University of Georgia. Kirby Smart said it this week on his press conference, almost as if he was watching our boy Jay Will and Brooks Austin and Christian Kirby over there on the Film Guy Network. You don't run north-south against Georgia. And teams haven't done it. Not even Auburn. Auburn got the most rushing yards on Georgia in, I think, 5 years. Had 200 yards the most in 5 years. They did it trying to run around Georgia. Granted, they had a 65-yard QB keeper, which helps a lot when you get explosive gainers on Georgia. But other than that, everyone's been trying to get onto the edge and, trying to beat Georgia with their athletes. And for the most part, Georgia's done well at stopping that. So Michigan, I would like that matchup, like Dan says. For me, Dan, I think it's a tie between Ohio State and Florida State. We don't know much about Kyle McCord as a quarterback. Obviously, he's very young, first-year starter. But how hard is it, to wreck the Lamborghini you got up there in Columbus when you have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka on the outside? Like, it's pretty hard to wreck that ship right there, that car right there. You just got to keep it inside the lines, keep it on the road, and let your playmakers do the rest. That's what they want to do. Marvin Harrison Jr., without Emeka Egbuka in the lineup, has been playing insane at an insane level. I think I want to say he has at least 4 games with over 100 yards receiving this year. He is going off by all standards. Then Florida State. Dan, we talked about it. Another one where I'm not sure what to make at the quarterback. Jordan Travis has played well in the games I've watched him, but he hasn't come up against a team like Georgia or a team like, in years past, you'd say Alabama, that has a really good defense and has those playmakers up front, has those playmakers on the back end to really cover him. But we say all the time, Dan, you need an elite quarterback and some elite receivers to beat Georgia. And they got 2 of them in Tallahassee in Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. Those 2 guys are playing at a really high level this year. Right, to me, of the four teams in the playoffs right now, I think them and Ohio State have the top weapons outside, not including Brock Bowers for Georgia, because obviously Brock Bowers is probably, I'd argue, the best player of any of the 4 teams. He started every single program up there. Maybe even be the best player in the College Football Playoff. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. may have something to say about that. Dan, 5 through 10, and we're going to move on from this because you got a fiery rant. What matchup? Okay, let's start here. What team? And I already know your dang answer because you said it preseason, Dan. You said Oregon's making the college football playoffs, and they're by all means, they're in a great position to do so at the moment. What's the moving and shaking looking like here? Who do you see, Oregon aside? I'm going to take Oregon out of the equation because I think that's the easy answer for you. What other teams do you see maybe potentially moving up the rankings? And if any, which team moves out of the top 10 completely if you had to choose?
So here's the thing I don't get. Oklahoma's number 9.
Yes.
Don't solo scream me. Why are they number 9? Did they just lose?
They just lost to Kansas.
Yeah, an unranked team. And they're number 9. I mean, out of everything that I've seen so far, that's the most trash thing I've seen on this damn list. Like Oklahoma number 9. That's just a joke. But anyway, if I'm not allowed to say Oregon, I think the team that can make the most noise out of that group of 5 would be Alabama, and for obvious reasons. I mean, they lost to Texas. I get that. It was the first game of the season. They didn't really know what they were doing with the quarterback position. Their offensive line didn't play well. They have a lot of young guys in the secondary. They're getting better every single week. They just are. I think at the end of the year, it's going to be a really good game. You know, my prediction would be Georgia, Alabama for the SEC championship game. Whoa, going out on a limb there. But, you know, like they still have LSU left on their schedule. That's going to be a really tough game for them. But, you know, I really think that Alabama has a chance to make some noise out of that group. But, you know, I know you said I can't pick Oregon, but I really like Oregon, and I think Bo Nix has come a long way. I mean, he's been in college for 38 years, and, you know, by this point, he's 47 years old, and he's playing great. So, I mean, Oregon's tough, and Dan Lanning's doing a hell of a job. He just really is.
You know, Dan, I saw CBS tweeted out, you know who started the most games in college football history?
Aaron Murray?
No, Bo Nix. He started 57 games as a 5-year senior. He started from his true freshman year.
Oh, yeah.
He very first game, and he's starting now as a 5th-year senior through COVID. And it's not like Stetson Bennett, where Stetson Bennett was, you know, didn't play for a whole year, didn't play for like 2 years. He's been playing since the beginning. This was a highly recruited kid out of high school, and he's the most experienced starting quarterback in all of college football history at this point. Just wild to see.
I think, the guy that was before, I believe it was Kellen Moore, wasn't it?
I believe so. I believe you're right on that one.
Boise State, I think he started for like 19 years.
And crazy. Stetson ended up being up there, but I mean, Bo Nix blows him out of the water.
The Stetson one kind of throws me for a loop because he basically didn't play for 3 years.
Yeah. He didn't see. I think the first time he ever saw action was when Jake Fromm got hurt against LSU, or maybe it was maybe he saw some fourth quarter action when Georgia.
Wait, didn't he come in relief? He came in relief in the Arkansas game. I thought that was his first game.
First game where he played actual major snaps. He played. Jake Fromm hurt his ankle against LSU in the SEC championship in 19, and he played for a little bit, but like maybe a snap or two.
We didn't have Jacob Eason?
No, this was after Eason left in 19.
Okay.
Dan's rant. I'm going to sit back and relax for this one because this one's going to be good.
All right, so my rant this week is on these smug-ass coaches in the press conferences, and it's so obnoxious and annoying, right? It's like it's not that hard to just be professional. Like the one thing that I will say is like Nick Saban and Bill Belichick set the record for being the smuggest coaches at any press conference. Like Bill Belichick is just a dick all the time, and he never turns it off. And I've never understood that. There's no reason for it, and it just drives me crazy. But the guy wins did win at a ridiculously level. And I think we are starting to see that the reason he won all those games is because he had a guy named Tom Brady. And maybe he's not as smart as everybody thought, but that's neither here nor there. But Nick Saban is I will say the GOAT of being smug. I mean, listen, Bill Belichick's in his own level, but I'm saying like Nick Saban will let you know when you're an idiot and when you ask stupid questions. But with Kirby, with Nick Saban, like, yes, they can be smug, but if you ask an intelligent question, for the most part, they're going to give you an intelligent answer. Now, there may be a situation where you ask a question that is a good question, but they just don't want to answer that question. And most of the time, they'll be like, that is a good question, or, they'll probably say something smart ass like, hey, that was a well thought out question, but I'm still not going to answer it. Whatever the case may be. But I say all that to say this. If you ask a stupid question, you deserve a stupid answer. And I agree with that. But when you're somebody like Jeff Collins, who is irrelevant now because he's been booted because he was a terrible football coach. But then you also have a guy like, I don't know, let's say Arthur Smith, who is the equivalent of born on third. Like everybody wants to say Ryan Day is born on third. This guy's born on third. His dad is the freaking founder of FedEx. Okay? Like the guy is rich. All right? He's done nothing in his entire career that's exceptional. He's never done anything exceptional. He was at Tennessee as the offensive coordinator. He handed the ball off, or had his quarterback hand the ball off to a generational back who had an unprecedented 3 years. He had the ultimate game manager at quarterback who didn't make mistakes, took care of the football. They matriculated the ball down the field. They were not an elite scoring offense. They didn't blow people out. They relied on their defense to bail them out of a lot of games and then just milk the clock. Nothing electric. Horrible hire by the Falcons, in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there because he's the Falcons coach now. There's nothing I can do about it at this point. But then you're going to go to your press conference and act like you're the smartest person in the world and act like everybody in the room is a bunch of idiots. They are asking you legitimate questions. They deserve legitimate answers. They're doing their job. Just because you can't answer the question, so you're going to act like a dick because you don't have the answers? Here's the thing. You're being criticized because you're not using the running back that you took in the top 10. You took him number 8 in the draft, Bijan Robinson. I don't think anybody would argue that Bijan Robinson is probably one of the top 5 backs in the NFL right now. But we wouldn't know that because we only give him 11 carries in a football game. Everybody wants to say, oh, maybe they're saving him for the second contract. I don't know. How about use them in the first contract? Because by all means, he's probably going to get hurt at some point, so you might as well get something out of him. And there are no such things as Adrian Petersons because they don't exist. Adrian Peterson is a unicorn. Those don't come along. So, and then you're saying you want to ride the hot hand, but statistically, Bijan Robinson had better stats than the other 2 running backs. I don't think he understands what the hot hand means. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. I cannot stand smug coaches to begin with, but then you have a smug coach who is making horrible decisions and being called out on his decisions. I don't know. There's this guy that you could have drafted at a position of need, defensive tackle named Jalen Carter, who is by PFF or whatever the most efficient pass rusher in the NFL this year. Or you could have a running back who's fantastic. Again, not taking shots at Bijan at a position you didn't need. And then on top of that, you're not going to use them. So I don't know what to do. You didn't play the quarterback last year early enough in the season. And then this year you're playing the quarterback who's obviously the worst quarterback in the league. And then you have the other guy come in and then you're like, it's not up to y'all, blah, 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 whatever. I am so over smug coaches to begin with. But then you have a smug coach who's making horrible decisions and then being rude to the people who are covering the sport. And I hope that, whenever your seat gets a little bit hotter, those same people that you're a jerk to, I hope they write all the articles about how your butt needs to be fired. And then, you did it to yourself, my guy. You did it to yourself. It doesn't take a whole lot to be courteous to your audience. And just be polite. Just be polite. Like, you can not answer a question if you don't want to, but you don't have to be a jerk about it, especially when you've done nothing to warrant that. That's my rant.
Let's get into Georgia-Florida recap. I told you Dan was going to bring it today. Dan brought it today.
Harrison doesn't want to touch that.
Dan brought the flamethrower. I'm just going to move on. Let Dan Mikey drop the mic, and we'll move on. Dan, Georgia-Florida recap. You've said it since day one, and what has that been?
That when Georgia's motivated to play, they play well. They don't play well. They play like a steamroller.
Yeah. I mean, it's what they've said since the beginning.
Are you kidding? No, you can't do that. That is horse crap and chicken liver. You unban him right now.
I just put him in timeout. He's not banned. But Dan, getting back because I just tracked the whole show. Yeah, I mean Georgia came out from aside from the first defensive possession where Florida goes down and scores, uh, really quickly. I might add, it was Georgia had a chance to get off the field on first down, and I was only half paying attention because I was working during the game doing something else. And I thought at one point I saw Graham Mertz running the sideline, so I thought Georgia got off the field, but no, they get a first down. 2 plays later, they get a touchdown. Dan, this prompted discussion on Twitter that I interjected in myself in, but I want to get your thoughts on it because I haven't talked to you about it. Georgia fans want Kirby to start, to stop deferring to the second half. They want to start getting the ball first because of Georgia's slow starts. I mean, is this even something that you would think about? Because to me, having the opportunity to double dip, score before halftime, and then score right after halftime, as Dan goes to highlight the comment that I see him put in the chat. I mean, is this even a conversation for you, or is this just dead in the water?
To me, it's irrelevant because here's my whole thing. I love the taking the ball in the second half because then you have an opportunity to possibly score and then get the ball back, right? It's just how a lot of times in the beginning of the football game, it's a lot of feeling out. And sometimes I feel like that first possession can be lost unless you just have an electric offense where you're going to go put points on the board. And now the other team is playing from behind the whole game. I understand both thoughts. Okay. Like like Georgia's offense last year was so electric and so efficient that they would be able to go down the field and put points on the board. If they wanted to take the ball to start the game, I get that. Like Lane Kiffin is the ultimate take the ball to start the game kind of guy. But Kirby is a defensive-minded football coach. He wants to put his defense out there first, get the stand, because in theory, if you get the stand to start the game and then you're able to go put points on the board, now you have a +1 possession advantage over the other team. So I've always been defer to the second half guy. So the argument to take the ball and start the game falls deaf on my ears because that's not the way I like to do it. I want that extra possession in the second half. When I feel like more times than not, the game's more. Now, listen, there are plenty of games where you're eliminated by halftime. Like Georgia absolutely eliminated Florida by halftime. So, I mean, there's that. But, Georgia got the ball to start the second half, remember.
Yeah, and the one thing that I keep going back to, Dan, and I even put this when I replied to somebody that had that take, was the fact that Georgia lost the game to Alabama in this championship game right before halftime. Because Alabama won the toss. They deferred. Georgia goes up, I think, 10-0. Alabama comes springing back into life. They score right before halftime. They go into the locker room. They come back out. They score again. They're up 2 scores. Boom, like that. Like it's Georgia. All the momentum that Georgia had is now gone by the start of the second half. Just gone. Completely gone. So I'm with you. It's a non-starter to me. I am defer to the second half. You figure out what you need to do. Because to me, Dan, it's like, man, the defense knows what they want to do going into the first drive. You're obviously going to scout their personnel, and you're going to base off what personnel you're in off of what the offense is doing. Florida's added an advantage. The offense is added an advantage to start the game because the offense has a script, and they kind of already know what you're going to do defensively, so they're going to get into their best plays to start the game, their best formations, what they think is going to work, and try and go score on you. So, and we see what the aftermath is. Florida doesn't score again until the fourth quarter in garbage time when Georgia has its backups on the field. Like, why do we need to change what we do? Why does Georgia need to change what they're doing if it's working? So, not here for it at all. At all. Just keep doing what you're doing because it's working, obviously. You won 2 national championships off it. Why change now is my thing. Let's get into takeaways, Dan, because I turned on this tape the other day, and man, did one person stand out to me. And actually, no, there was 2 people that stand out to me. And I told you, I texted you when I started watching it. There's one person I really want to mention, Dylan Fairchild, left guard. And this offensive line as a whole, in my opinion, this is the best game they played. The best game they played from pass protection standpoint, from a run game standpoint. I think Georgia rushed for more yards in some other games. But when you're averaging 4.5 yards per carry on the ground, you rush for 171, and you're absolutely moving folks, especially Dylan Fairchild. That whole first drive, if I'm not mistaken, Dylan Fairchild was moving folks in the run game. Just straight up moving them. And I really think this Georgia offensive line has finally found some chemistry, has finally found what works, and is doing it at a really high rate. Really excited to see how this progresses because you're going to get Amarius Mims back at some point. I don't know what that is. I'm curious. Xavier Truss, I think he's a 5th-year senior. He's played a lot better, I would say. I'm not an offensive line expert, but I think he's played well at right tackle. Not saying that you're not going to start Amarius Mims, because I think Amarius Mims is a day one starter for you when healthy, and he's definitely going to come back into this lineup. But I don't know what you're going to do at left guard, because to me, Dylan Fairchild has just found it. He's found it. He's successful, doing the right things. And I'm really excited to watch this offensive line going into next year, because I know you lose Cedric Van Pran, you lose Tate Ratledge, most likely. You lose potentially Amarius Mims, but you're bringing back Ernest Green and Dylan Fairchild on the left side of that line. Those guys are going to be experienced. Those guys are going to be battle tested. Those guys are going to be ready to play from day one. Dan, what were your thoughts on the offensive line?
I felt like all season long that the pass blocking really hasn't been an issue for Georgia. I don't recall, and maybe I'm wrong. I haven't watched every minute of every game like everybody else has, because I've got other obligations right now. But I just really never felt like pass rush was or pass blocking was an issue as the run blocking. I didn't feel like we had the aggressiveness, and it's getting better every single week. I feel like you nailed it when you said, I feel like the chemistry is there, the cohesion is there. I feel like they're starting to move. And then as a result of that, my biggest takeaway was that Daijun Edwards is really starting to hit his stride. And, I keep hearing it talked about now, like, oh, well, now Daijun is draftable. I'm like, wasn't he always draftable? I always thought Daijun was draftable, but I think he's really working himself up to maybe a day 2 type guy, maybe 2nd or 3rd round. I think that's reasonable, especially if he continues to excel and his numbers keep getting better and better. But I really think that this Georgia team is elite when they can run the ball down your throat. And that's really what's been kind of missing lately, is that ability to just mash. And I think the offensive line is starting to mash. And I think that Daijun Edwards is the perfect back. Very similar to where with the healthy Zamir White, when he could just pound you and pound you and pound you. And I think Daijun can do that. And Nick Chubb could do that too. Obviously, Nick Chubb had that gear where he could just take off. But, Nick Chubb got those really difficult yards at really important times in the game. And I feel like he's really come to be the back that we count on the most to get us those difficult yards. And, as a byproduct of all that, the play action pass, which Georgia's always been really good at. And Mike Bobo, that's one of his favorite things, is the play action pass, that he's able to execute it. And then you have guys like, Ra and Lovett really starting to get more and more involved every single week. You could really see him starting to get comfortable, see Beck get comfortable with that. Now, with the Delp thing, like, I always felt like Delp was going to slide right in and just be fine. And you say, why would you think that? Well, because Carson Beck and Delp were on the scout team together, and they were working week in and week out. So they naturally have a little bit of chemistry together. And then Ladd is Ladd. And I laugh when people say he's deceptively fast, or, you have a hard, it's like, just say he's white. Okay. I mean, that's what you want to say, is that he's a white receiver and you didn't think he was that good, but he is that good and he is that fast. 4.4 is 4.4. I don't care who you are. You could be white, black, red. It doesn't matter. If you run a 4.4, you're freaking fast, bro. And, when you're shifty, and fast, that's really dangerous. And Ladd continues to show everybody how good he is week in and week out. Oscar Delp, I thought, fit right in just like I thought he would. Made a hell of a one-handed catch across the middle. Or was that on the sideline? I can't remember. Yeah.
Right up across the sideline.
Yeah, up the sideline, the one-hand grab. But and then Lawson Lucky came in and blocked. I thought blocked pretty well. I didn't watch every one of his plays. I don't think he had a catch, though. Lawson didn't have a catch, did he?
Not that I remember. Not that
right,
I
you
remember.
can just stay on the screen. Quit doing the solo stuff. So anyway, Joe, believe it or not, the guy who has really been Georgia's biggest cheerleader in the media so far is Joey Galloway, who is an Ohio State guy of all places. He's been Georgia's biggest cheerleader, and he brought up the point for the third time. For the third time, Joey Galloway has brought up the point, with Brock Bowers being gone, this Georgia team is going to learn how to use all its other weapons, and so when Brock Bowers comes back, they're going to be lethal. And I think he's 100% right. I never thought in a million years that I would say that Joey Galloway is the voice of reason on ESPN, but he is. And I think he makes a lot of valid points. And, just for the record, he had Georgia number 1 in football. So maybe that's the guy that we all support from now on.
Whew. We went everywhere there. We went everywhere. I asked Dan about offensive line. He gave me the whole show notes. I'm just joking. But hey, I'm with you, Dan, on everything. I think all around the offense played at a really high level. Carson Beck, talk about coming out party. Carson Beck had himself a day. 19 of 28, 315, 2 touchdowns. Even had a heck of an NFL throw, which, Dan, I don't know why, but when you go on the timeline and you post a really cool throw from Carson Beck, you get a bunch of rival fans coming in your mentions saying all this and that about, the safety could have made the play. And I'm going to put it up on screen here, Dan, because I sent it to you. But I get it. I guess I need to add context to why I put this out. But watch me. If you're not watching on YouTube, by the way, come watch this on YouTube so you can watch this play. He's going to drift left, look back over the middle. They're running a dagger concept at the top of the screen, or to the left side of the screen. They're having Dominic Lovett run a clear out route. They're going to have a dig, 10 to 12-yard dig with Ladd McConkey right beside it. And Carson Beck going to step to his left, drift to his left, defender in his face, and he's going to be early to the dig. Ladd McConkey, right here at the top left of the screen, is just now hitting his break. He is early to this, and it's a hell of a throw. This is an NFL throw. NFL evaluators are going to turn on this tape and say, oh my God, who's the quarterback that just made that throw? And shout out to Ladd McConkey for catching that. Shout out to Ladd McConkey for getting 25 more yards after the catch with that. Heck of a throw. But you got people in the mentions, Dan. I got a person in my mentions coming in here talking about a Purdue quarterback. I'm like, who mentioned him? I'm talking about Georgia. I'm not talking about Purdue.
And Carson Beck is prototypical NFL size. He's making tight window throws. And you said this is his coming out party. For me, it's Kentucky. I mean, the guy had 389 yards and 4 touchdowns against Kentucky. He put up 51 points. That was his coming out party. I mean, he played well. He's played well in every game. I don't think he's really had a bad game. I mean, maybe you could point to the Vandy game. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know. I don't think he's had a bad game. I think he lit it up. But you're right. You're 100% right. That throw, tight window throw, throwing the ball, you're throwing them open, right? You're throwing before the break. That is an NFL throw. I always heard, our coaches always said in high school, a high school quarterback throws after the break. A college quarterback throws on the break. An NFL quarterback throws before the break. And that's the progression. And he's throwing NFL style. He's throwing before the break. So if I said this, 4 or 5 weeks ago, if you're bitching about Carson Beck, if you think Carson Beck's the problem on this Georgia football team, you just don't know football, period.
You think Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo's the problem with this football team for this offense? I'll find you a door to this stream. I'll find you a door. We will find one to this offense. But hey, Dan, you had an excellent text Saturday. Mark Rick and Mike Bobo have ran this program into the ground.
No, that's not what I said. So you're not old enough to understand, but there was a joke that has been running since the early 2000s, and it was Mark Richt has lost control of the program and fire Bobo. And that's I have a group of friends that has been a running joke forever. Whenever it doesn't matter, anything could happen. There could be war in Israel, and we'd be like, "Oh my God, Mark Richt has lost control of this program. Fire Bobo." I mean, it's just a running joke, and it's been around forever. And anybody who's an honest dog fan, we only have one person watching, but if anybody listening, if you are a dog fan and go back to before Harrison was born in the early 2000s, you'll know that joke. So that was the joke.
Where am I going to go next? Let's talk defense real quick, Dan. We saw some new names this year. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins. I completely forgot about this guy because we hadn't seen him all year. Yeah, TID has come back, played like a stud, got himself a strip sack one of his first snaps of the game. We saw some younger guys too. Damon Wilson catching praise on the timeline. Marvin Jones, I know we've seen him this year. or Gabe Harris, excuse me. You saw him. A lot of young edge rushers, a lot of those guys, those 5 stars that Georgia signed over the years. You saw those guys, and to me, it was probably the most dominant this Georgia defense line has looked in a game all year. Maybe aside from the second half against South Carolina. I don't think Georgia got many sacks against South Carolina, but there's a lot of pressure. Well, today, Georgia had 4 sacks, or Saturday, excuse me, had 4 sacks against Florida. Probably a crap load of pressures. Dan, defensively, I know everybody wants to talk about the 2 garbage time touchdowns. I know nobody likes seeing those put up because it really just doesn't reflect how the game went. Florida wasn't worth 20 points. They were barely worth 7 points. But hey, they get 13 points in the second half, in the fourth quarter alone in the last, I think, 6 minutes, and 43-20. What was your takeaways from this defense, Dan?
The same as always. It's fast, flow into the ball, smart. I think that's the one thing that gets lost whenever we talk about defenses and we talk about Kirby Smart defenses. Yes, they're fast. Yes, they're athletic. Yes, they're arguably the most talented players in the country. But the one thing I think gets lost time in and time out is how smart these guys are. How well they watch film, how they adjust. Is very, very rarely do we see them make an error where it's a mental error, right? I mean, like sometimes maybe they over pursue here or there or something like that, but like they don't really have busts. And like for me, a bust is a lot of guys doing the wrong things. It's usually maybe one guy's a little bit out of position, and Kirby will absolutely railroad him for being out of position. But the one takeaway for me, and I think like I said, I think it gets lost a lot of times, is just how smart this defense is. And they showed it again, especially on that 4th down play where they decided to snap it between the legs of their quarterback to ETN in the backfield. And Smile Mondan just runs right past the wide receiver. He's like, nope, you're not going to get the ball because I'm about to go cause havoc in the backfield. And ETN never even had a chance to get that off because Smile was on his jock in a blink of an eye. Again, smart. They diagnosed it. They weren't fooled. The entire Georgia defense didn't flinch. They were ready to go. So, my biggest takeaway is it's a smart damn defense.
Dan, before we transition real quick into Mizzou talk, answer this question for me and Zach.
What?
Talking about Dominique Wilkins' the commit.
Yeah, Jake. Oh, yeah. So he's at Grayson, super athletic, super bouncy. I would say up to this point of his career, he is basically excelled off of just his athleticism. Maybe not as sharp as some of the other guys in the basic fundamentals of basketball. Maybe not the best shooter. Maybe not the best passer. Maybe doesn't dribble as well as some other guys, but he's extremely athletic, and he's actually at a really good spot at Grayson. They really developed their guys. He's playing with some really, really quality. They lost Caden Allen. Caden Allen went down to Mount Verde. That's where Caden Allen went. Caden is in Cannon's age group. And so, but they got a lot of really good playmakers over there at Grayson. Really, really, really high-end type of guy, like ceiling guy. Like I said, I mean, it's one of the easiest things in the world to work on the fundamentals, right? Like that's the thing that you can drill and you can go to trainers, you can get better at your fundamentals. The one thing that you can't really get better at is being a freak athlete, and he's already got that. He is born that way. So freak athlete, super high upside, just basically got to work on some of the rough, just polishing the rough edges. And by no means am I saying he's not good at those things. I'm just saying maybe he's not elite at those things like some of the other kids are. But I think this is it's really good that they got him early. I think he could be a project guy early, and then obviously he could shape into a really dynamic player for the Dogs.
One more, Dan. Mike White's been on a heater lately. I know you know this person and you know his family. So go ahead and do it, Dan. We haven't had a show since Ace Newell. Probably I think he's the third most talented Georgia recruit in terms of stars that Georgia basketball has landed all time. Give us Dan Kelly's thoughts on that.
So my thought on that is that Ace Newell is incredible, and he gets downgraded. Like he was a top 5 player in the country in one service. Now he's like 13 or 11 or 10 or whatever the case may be. The reason that he's not as high as some of the other guys is because he's not an on-ball guy. He's not the guy who's going to take the ball and score 35 points every single night. But what he is an outstanding defender, really high motor guy, really educated, just a very, very smart kid. He is a absolute rim protector. Go back and watch his clips from Team USA. He was the best defender that we had on Team USA in the Goodwill games or whatever the hell they were called this past year. By far the best defender on the team. And he's a lefty. He could step out and shoot. He can knock down threes. I would say he's probably 40%, 35 to 40% 3-point shooter in high school, which is actually pretty incredible for somebody's size. I want to say 6'10". I know that sometimes they get like lofted up a little bit, but he's kind of a legit 6'10", maybe 6'9", but probably 6'10". Real long, real athletic, could definitely put on some weight. I think that's the one thing that he'll have to do eventually is put on a little bit of weight, but he's really strong, really athletic. He's incredible. And, but the reason that he's not going to be as high as some guys like Cooper Flagg is he's not ball dominant. He plays off other guys. He rebounds extremely well. He finishes at the rim, finishes with contact. He's an extremely, extremely talented kid.
All I'm hearing is, Mike White, for listen, go get some shooters, surround these guys, go get somebody that can be a knockdown bucket getter, and you got a hell of a team right there, just off the bat. Dan, Georgia, Missouri, it's a ranked matchup. To this date, is probably the biggest game Georgia's going to play in at this point in the year, has played in all year. Obviously, you'll have Ole Miss following that, and then on the road at Tennessee. Missouri's not, and I think Greg McElroy said this well, Missouri's not the traditional ranked team. They're not the traditional, program that you think of as a good opponent. Like, people scoff at Missouri. People scoffed at Georgia having to come back and beat Missouri last year. Kirby Smart gave them a ton of respect after that post game where Georgia had to go back, had a heck of a comeback in the fourth quarter to beat them. But now they have, to date, they beat Kansas State week 3, 30-27. Kansas State ranked, I want to say, they're ranked currently out of the Big 12. They barely lost to LSU, 49-39 shootout. They beat Kentucky. They whooped South Carolina the other week. They're actually a talented football team for the first time in a while. Brady Cook, guy Georgia saw last year, playing at a really high level. He's had, let's count them, 4 games. It looks like 4 games where he's thrown for over 400 yards. And that man, his top weapon, Luther Burden, in all of those games, almost every game they've played, aside from 3, he's gone for over 100 yards receiving. Luther Burden, former 5-star receiver commit, somebody that Georgia wanted, went to Mizzou, and now they're starting to get a 5-star every once in a while. That's, Mizzou's a team that we talked in the offseason, Dan, when Georgia was after Williams-Nwaneri, the 5-star edge rusher. Mizzou, don't fire Elijah Drinkwitz if he's going to bring you a 5-star every other cycle. Don't do it, because those are some talented football players that can elevate your football team. That's usually below average. Right now, they're above average. They're 7-1. Coming into Sanford Stadium for a 3:30 kick. Who would have thought that on CBS? Dan, to me, I think Mizzou's probably going to want to pursue litigation against the playoff committee, because I think they're going to get done dirty, man. They are going to face the number 2 Georgia team with a chip on their shoulder at home, 3:30 kick. Basically, prime time for SEC is 3:30. They got to sue the playoff committee at this point, because I think Georgia is going to be on their best game.
Well, I don't think the rankings has anything to do with it. I think that Georgia had this game circled for the last couple of weeks because everybody's been talking about Missouri. And that's the one thing that Kirby loves to do and the Georgia players love to hear is people talking about other people, right? They love when the other team gets all the hype. Like we saw it last year with the Tennessee game. They relished the opportunity to rub Tennessee's nose in it because they just thrive that way. And everybody's been talking about how good this Missouri team is. And listen, Luther Burden is ridiculous, okay? Like I don't think there's a team in the country that would be like, no, we can't use you because he's that good. And you're 100% right when you said Georgia wanted him. I wanted him. I think everybody wanted him. And he's lived up to it. And also keep in mind that he doesn't have the weapons around him that these other guys do. So he's doing this as the focal point of the offense. To me, that deserves extra credit, little extra snaps right there. Because Luther Burden is dominating the field when everybody in the world knows he's the guy they're going to try to get the ball to. I mean, you could say the same thing of Brock Bowers, but Brock Bowers have weapons around him. So if you decide to focus on Brock Bowers, we're going to torch you somewhere else. Missouri doesn't necessarily have that luxury. Now, what Georgia does have is an elite secondary They have a lot of guys, and they have a guy named Malachi Starks over the top who's proven to be a ball hawk. And I think that could prove problems. But Georgia's defense is elite when they want to be. And I think you're 100% right when you say this is a huge trap for Missouri to walk into, because Georgia's just lying in wait. We're like a dog ready to hunt. And I think if we didn't see the best version of Georgia this weekend, I would be shocked. I would be absolutely stunned. I think we would come on the show and I would tell you, I don't know what the hell just happened, because I anticipate this will be the best we see Georgia look all year long. That's just my anticipation. I could be wrong. Maybe like Dabo Swinney says, your expectations outweigh your appreciations.
I'm going to hold off on Dabo real quick. Dabo had a rant. I don't know if you saw it. Dabo
ranted. It was like 10 minutes long on a guy. That's what
on
he
a fan. Said, if you want the job, come do it. I'm like, whoo.
Well,
but yeah.
This whole thing is that your expectations outweigh your appreciation. How's that for a line?
Can we add Dabo Swinney to the smug coaches list? No, and I know he has 2 national championships.
He's normally not smug, but he's very reactionary.
He's developed into smug.
But the one thing about Dabo Swinney, if you go back all the way to the beginning, he has his resume and everything he's ever achieved on the tip of his tongue, ready to spit it out. Like, Dabo, this was a bad play call. Well, I've won 17 games in 3 days. I mean, he's got it just ready to go. He's the only coach I've ever seen do we've all seen the coach read his resume right before he gets fired. But Dabo has his resume and his career highlights on the tip of his tongue, ready to fire off anytime somebody has criticism for him. But we did it again, Harrison. We segued.
Hey, I'm cool with it because I had to work in it while we could. But yeah, Dan hit all the points here. Every single point in the book here. Malachi Stark's obviously going to be a big probably opponent for Burden. Not because he's going to be covering, but like you said, he's going to be lurking over top. This is just one of those games, one of those people that you're going to shift coverage towards. When you got, Luther Burden on the outside against whether it's Kamari Lassiter, whether it's against Dalen Everett, Julio, Julian Humphrey, I know he goes by Julio. You're going to shift coverage over there. You're going to make sure you have a safety over the top. That's what Georgia's going to do. They're going to try to take him away. Kirby, I know you don't do this a lot. At Georgia, I know you work left, right when it comes to corners. Even sometimes you go field boundary corner. But, man, you got people out here saying that Kamari Lassiter is not even a top 10 cornerback in this 2024 NFL draft class. Not even top 10. Think about how wild that is. Kamari Lassiter, not a top 10 corner in the upcoming NFL draft. Wild to me because he's probably top 5, maybe top 3 at this point. But let him travel. Go put Kamari Lassiter and let him travel with Luther Burden. Let those two alphas go at it because I think it's going to develop into a serious chess match between those two. Let him do it. I want to see that matchup. Let Kamari Lassiter go travel against the best. Let him match up with him every single rep. And if Luther Burden's going to see somebody in a Georgia jersey, let it be Kamari Lassiter and let it be Malachi Starks come over the top to either, pick off that football or to put in the dirt. Dan.
The one thing that I would tell Missouri is to make sure that you keep Burden out of the middle of the field because, you got Javon Bullard in the middle.
Ooh,
Malachi Starks will hit you.
Somebody.
Yeah, but your linebackers will drop back in the coverage. And if you just mess around on the wrong particular play and you got Burden coming across the middle and you maybe got Smile Mondon coming the other way or, just any one of those linebackers really. But I would say keep them out of the middle of the field. That would be my if I'm Missouri, that would be something that I try not to do is get my star receiver killed.
Well, I think this matchup comes down to this very thing, Dan. And you see Ohio State, I think, and some of these other teams that have really good receivers on the outside, they're able to do it because they were able to draw the attention. But if Missouri can prove themselves enough that, hey, Burden's a problem for you, that you're going to have to bring a safety from out of the box. You're going to have to bring your second safety out of the box and get Georgia out of its traditional single high system and put them over top because you got Burden and somebody else that's killing Georgia, then that bodes well for them. If they can prove they got more than just Luther Burden that's going to need help getting, safety help over the top, then that is, I would say, formula for success for Missouri. Because if you take that extra safety out of the box, that's one less hat in the box, and it's easier to run on against a Georgia football team that specializes in stopping the run. I really want to see that. Can they do that against Georgia? I don't think they can. I think Georgia's obviously going to have matchups in place to face Burden, going to be ready for that, whether it's a traveling Kamari Lassiter or it's having Malachi Starks or Javon Bullard over the top of everywhere he goes. Another question that I think another key for Missouri, if Missouri is going to get a win here, they're going to have to be able to run the football. And I get it. It is so cliche at this point because we talk about it every single week. How do you beat Georgia? Well, you need to go off, have some explosive passing plays, and you go pass the football at a really high rate. Do it well, not turn the ball over. You also got to be able to run it. The people who can run the ball in Georgia are usually the teams that beat Georgia. Because if Georgia can't stop the run, that's one less. That's one more thing they got to worry about. If they can make you a passing football team, it's almost over at that point. It's almost over because they can just stock up, take people out of the box, and don't have to worry about you putting the football on the ground. So there you go, Missouri. If you're watching, those are the two keys of the game. Can you create explosives on the outside the numbers, get the passing game going, and can you run the football if Georgia pulls a safety out of that box? Because that's one less hat you got to worry about as an offensive line unit. Dan, score predictions. Missouri, Georgia, Sanford Stadium, 3:30, CBS. Shut up, Gary. Let's go.
So I don't remember what my score prediction was last week, but I felt like I was pretty close. I felt like I was kind of spot on. Maybe I wasn't. I don't know. I have to go back and look. But I don't know. For me, I don't know. This game to me feels like 45-17, 45.
Ooh.
Yeah, 45-20 maybe. I don't know, somewhere in there. Like I think Missouri's going to score a couple, maybe late. Georgia's got a tendency to pull the dogs off and let them kind of add on late. I don't know. For some reason, I have Georgia getting to 45. That's just what I have them getting to. Maybe they won't. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Maybe it'll be a lot closer. But I just, in my heart, I feel like this is going to be a game where we get the best version of Georgia. And I think they're going to be really aggressive. Now, the one thing that I will tell you is that Kirby respects Eli Drinkowitz for whatever reason. So maybe 45 is rich. Maybe it's more like 34-17 or something like that.
I'm going to ride with you on this one. I'm not going to say Georgia gets 40, although I think they could. I definitely think they could. But, Georgia could have gotten 50 against Florida. Call me wrong, but Georgia definitely could have put up 50 on Florida if they wanted to.
I think you're wrong because I think you would have if he could have.
You think?
Yeah, because he hates Florida.
I know that, but I don't think he wants to get Billy fired at this point. I think for sure he would have laid the point. I mean, maybe he already did. I don't know. I forget what the score was, but he definitely laid some points on Dan Mullen in 2021 to go ahead and get that situation to where it was. I'm going to go 37-14. I think Missouri finds the end zone twice, but I think Georgia gets away with it maybe by halftime, a little bit before halftime like they did against Florida. My hot take, if you're willing to bet on it, first score of the game, go ahead and lay the money on Missouri to score first. This is not financial advice, just my opinion. Missouri, first touchdown. I think they're going to score because we've seen over the last few weeks, Georgia will let you get on the board early, and then they're going to shut you down for the rest of the game.
So here's the question I need answered is UGA 15.5 minus 15.5. That is rich. I mean, this is arguably the best team they've played to date. They're number 12. They are the number 12 Missouri Tigers. They're 15.5-point favorites.
I think Georgia's I think Georgia just covered for one of the first times this past weekend too. Georgia's not great against the spread this year.
No,
but I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it because they're ranked number 2, Dan. And we said at the beginning of the show that Kirby Smart was probably rejoicing at the fact that when he gets a text from his old buddy, that texts him about Dan Mullen, that he's ranked number 2 in the college football playoff rankings. I think Kirby Smart's gonna be happy about it. I think that's gonna juice up that football team like it did against Tennessee last year. I'm going to take Georgia minus 15.5. I think they're going to cover. I think they're going to go over that and win this in hand. It was a loaded show today, boys and girls. Absolutely loaded show. We had a blast. We got Dan's Alabama accent impression again after the Alabama's back rant that we had a few weeks ago. You know where to find them, at Dan Kiley3 on Twitter. I'm at Harrison Reno on Twitter. We'll see you back next year, Tuesday, 7:30. Win or lose, because you damn sure can't have a draw in college football. Anyways, we'll see you back. Episode 107, Top Talk Podcast. We appreciate you for being here. Like, subscribe, rate us 5 stars because we're the best damn recruit in the industry at this point. We'll see you back here next week.